So we have a great panel here for you today, and our focus is corporate venture capital, really trying to break it down, understand how it differs from traditional venture, and giving a sense of what a startup and a founder can expect as they go through the CVC process. So what I'd love is just the panelists to just say their name quickly. We already had intros, and tell me about the last startup you invested in. David.
Hi, David Height, B37 Ventures. So we've done a few startups investments this year, the latest being one called Windfall Bio. Windfall Bio is in the climate tech space or planetary health. What they're doing is they have a proprietary technology, a microbe actually, that consumes methane and converts it into nitrogen-rich fertilizer. Many people don't know that while CO2 gets a lot of the press and a lot of the investment, it's actually methane that is 84 times more damaging to the environment, and it's really important for us and the value chain of the corporations which we work with to have this investment and be able to deploy it in their products and services.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Bryan Chow. One of our more recent investments has been with a company called Miston Labs, which they are building a layer 1 protocol on the blockchain to help facilitate. Really, the biggest industry that they're trying to drive is gaming on blockchain and how they can facilitate, billions of transactions simultaneously to be able to support that sort of an ecosystem.
Hi, all. Francesco Marzano, head of CMI Ventures. The CMI Ventures itself was really recently formed, so we haven't done an investment yet.
Okay.
We actually, the only investment we have is with David and his partner in B37 fund. But personally, the last investment I did was in a payments infrastructure company that's on top of the Lightning Network. So for Latin America, that's a game changer in terms of banking the unbanked population and taking advantage of that blockchain and crypto space.
Hi, all. Did I miss introduction? Should I quickly?
No, we gave introductions already, so just quick name, company, last investment.
So I'm Ryan Piela, Executive Director at Estee Lauder Companies. Our most recent investment that we just announced, we did it a while ago, but was a clean cosmetics brand in China. So we invest primarily in CPG and upstream into the R&D, labs and innovation that can create brands. And so we do this all around the world. And so this brand called Code Mint out of China had some really interesting innovation on first to market with their manufacturer, with new raw materials, really interesting distribution backed by an influencer as well there, and is our first investment or public investment in China as well, so an exciting moment for us.
Exciting. So Francesco, you're starting a new fund. You're here on the CVC panel. Tell us, what were you thinking as you built this CVC fund? What were the first principles that you started with? What do you think guides you, and what do you think is different than a traditional, than having it be a traditional venture?
Well, the way we looked at it at CMI is we really need to dive into the venture ecosystem to find external innovation capacity rather than just internal capacity. At the end of the day, I think, you're a corporate as well. We have some funds here, but corporates, I think by definition, are more developed companies, and some may be really good at innovation, but you don't have that startup DNA that gives you the versatility, adaptability, the power to focus 100% in a problem to solve. So that's one of the core ideas of why we started the venture arm, in really accessing or collaborating with the founders on one side, and then in what we can add value in is really, we as a corporate, we have a very developed industrial footprint, production capacities, go-to-market capabilities. So giving the founders that really also gives them access to capabilities that they wouldn't otherwise develop until very late stage. So.
David, you've had your fund for 10 years, and you have an interesting structure, right? Because a lot of corporations are your LPs. As you work with the CVC arms in in the investments that you're making. How are you differing from them, and how are you aligning with them?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have 7 different multinational corporations which are our investors. They're doing business in 35 countries around the world. Many of them, not all of them, have their own corporate venture capital arm. And I believe that we work in a very complementary way. Cheka was just describing a little bit about the motivation for CMI Group opening their CVC. What we're doing in a complementary way with them is looking at their long-term strategies, which we're able to get a very deep and personal view on through our collaboration with the CVCs, but identify in those long-term strategies of the corporation where there's an opportunity to move 3 or 4 of their strongest, most value accretive business outcome desires or accretive to their corporate value, and find the intersection with a startup in Silicon Valley where we do all of our investing that has an investment syndicate formed by some of the best investors in the world. Our goal with our corporations is to give them access to startups which are coming from tier 1 VCs that have the sustained reputation of creating most of their venture returns in the industry on a recurring basis.
Cool, thank you. Ryan, you're at Estee Lauder. Everyone knows one of your brands, I would think, at least. Huge global company. What's the right stage for a startup to come to you? And to turn that question on its head, which I would love for all of you to answer, how do CVCs seek their deals?
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, Estee Lauder Companies is a large beauty conglomerate. We have over 25 brands already underneath the portfolio. MAC, La Mer, the Estee Lauder brand itself. And so some of what we're looking for, and we've done this in the past with The Ordinary and Dr. Jart, is that minority investment turns long-term partnership and eventually full acquisition. And so our group was created to say, can we play earlier, right? Can we join at those seed stages, at the idea phases, and help support? And I'd say, when it comes to CVC, and I'm probably very similar across the panel, is, we're not just money, right? We're very strategically focused, and so we're playing in a way where we want success for the startups. And so when you think of it, I'd say, what's the money and, or the money plus, right? What else are we bringing to the table? And what I see from ourselves as well as other CVCs is it's finding the right time for the startup, right? We know that corporates aren't as fast, they're not quite as nimble, and so things like timelines are longer, payment terms can be longer, and so if you're collaborating and incubating, a project together, I think there's a right level at the startup where you say, all right, I can take advantage of what they have. When we're incubating, we have consumer data, we have new product development data, we have R&D teams that can come in and support and say, okay, this is what you can take advantage of at the idea phases. If you're maybe past that as a business, it starts to say, okay, what else is advantageous? And if you're co-developing, not quite our model, but other CVCs that say, hey, we want to pilot something, we want to incubate it with you. It's hard sometimes for a startup to put all your eggs in that basket because maybe you have 60-day, 90-day payment terms, 9-month, 12-month, 16-month contracts. And so I always say, make sure you're set up right to work with how the corporate works because, it can be often we see a startup could get smothered, right? Or, not be set up in a right way to live that long, right? The 18, 12-month timelines.
So someone like Estee is actually coming in at a pre-seed level, it sounds like.
Yeah, we'll come in, we've seen just pitch decks where somebody has an idea and we believe in the vision, we believe in the white space. And some of what we do, is we try to create a little bit of that separation. We're saying we're not trying to integrate you into Estee Lauder systems. And as a brand grows up and hits 50 million, 30 million, 50 million, 75 million in sales, we say, okay, maybe now it starts to make sense for us to take a majority stake, start to use our IT, our distribution, but our HR, our legal, whatever it could be. But up at the upfront stages, we're like, you need to be nimble, right? You need to move fast. So let's create that separation, but then tap into us where you can get that value, that plus.
So at that stage, you're just a check, and as things improve, Like, yeah, you could leverage the corporate.
Yeah, and it's just different ways to tap us,
Yeah.
right? Like we got the data up front. Don't use our HR, right? Don't use our
Yeah.
procurement. We
Fran-
have, yeah.
Yeah, Francesco, do you agree with that? Is that, I mean, as you're setting the vision for what you're going to be doing, right? But that's an exciting time. Like, how do you see yourself investing in terms of stage?
No, look, I agree with everything you just heard. At the end of the day, corporates rather are very bureaucratic in every sense of the word, some more than others. And so what you don't want to do as a startup is really partner with a corporate and have you smother them and really kill that fire that you have as a startup and that flexibility and willingness to like grit. So I agree what you just said, and as CMI, really what we were, or how we envision it is really, again, very strategic. We know for a fact that we're not the guys with the deepest pocket, so what do we really add to the table, bring to the table? And that's our data specific to our region, 100-year history and operation capabilities. So have the startup tap us for those resources more so than the others, I think is the strategic way to see it and how we want to collaborate with them.
Great. Bryan, you're the traditional guy on the stage in terms of just doing pre-seed, seed stage, pure venture fund, no LPs that are corporates that I'm aware of. But if a startup came to you and said, hey, like, I want to have Estee Lauder invest or Samsung invest, let's say they're seed stage or they're getting their Series A, would you advise them to take the capital then? Or how would you think about it and what would you say to a startup?
Yeah, so the way that I approach CVC's investing on a cap table is ultimately you've got to look at what are the ultimate goals of that CVC, just because every CVC has a different structure of what they're trying to achieve with their CVC Corp. So some are pure play investors, some are trying to de-risk their supply chain through investment, and then some are looking to acquire the companies. So ultimately, we need to decide whether or not we think that CVC is a fit for what direction this company is trying to take. If they're trying to grow to become $1 billion company, but we know that that CVC really just tries to get the company early on at that $5-6 million valuation, grow to be $100 million, and then bring them in-house, it may not be a fit for us, but that's ultimately up to the founder to decide. So whether they want to take that money is completely up to them. But as a founder, if you're looking at a CVC, look into what they do as a CVC, what their goals and values are, if that aligns with yourself. Because money is money at the end of the day. You can get it from many sources. So ultimately, as a founder, trying to determine what works for you.
What do you think it impacts, like exiting? Like David, do you think it impacts the way a startup exits if they take CVC capital too early?
I'm going to answer that question, but I got to throw some shine on CMI here. We have experience with a lot of corporations at B37 Ventures, and in that continuum of nimble to bureaucratic, you fall definitely much more on the nimble side. So congratulations for that.
First news to me.
That's good. Yeah, I think the investment syndicate, the quality of the investment syndicate, I think helps shape a founder's predestiny. And I use the word predestiny only to emphasize that our belief as institutional investors is that the founder has the mandate to take the company to where he or she wants the company to go. If that's IPO, then IPO. If that's a merger and acquisition, and sometimes there's failures and a shutdown. So taking corporate money in and of itself, I don't know informs so much that predestiny, much more than the founder, him or herself, surrounding themselves with a good investment syndicate that can help them understand when is the right time to get the most value for their startup. And if that's a merger or an acquisition with a corporate that has invested in them, or another corporation, well, that's great. If that's saying no to those offers, even though they are a corporation as an investor, and going further the distance, creating more value for all of their investors, and becoming much more prominent in the market, then we very strongly encourage that. We've not had an experience yet where one of our 7 corporate investors, has postured themselves to acquire one of our companies. But if we did, that would be something between the corporation and the founders, and we would work with that company to try to determine whether or not it was really the best outcome for them and their syndicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I've a set of friends who are founders that came out of Salesforce, built something they knew Salesforce needed, and at their seed stage round took a very large investment from Salesforce with the hope of selling it back to Salesforce. So, and when you hear that, it's just like, I'm like, is that really viable? But maybe it is. I mean, you know, as a
lot
strategy.
of people think that's how Steve Jobs got his job back at Apple.
Really?
After
Are
he
you
was
kidding?
fired. No, he went and did a startup that was something Apple needed.
There you go. So it's a good way to get your job back, folks.
Yeah, Ashwini, if I may, like as a CVC, like
Yeah.
our hope is that the other investors that we join on the cap table with see it as a de-risked exit, right? You know, we are acquiring brands, and you know, we just did Tom Ford for multi-billion. We saw the acquisition of The Ordinary for multi-billion, right? And especially in beauty, there aren't a lot of players that can pay that much for a beauty brand and do it consistently. And so, you know, we have the track record of it, and our hope is to say, okay, well, you know, if you can build on your own, and then we're reactive to the M&A market, right? You know, you bring us the brand, and we say, does this fit our strategy? Our hope is if we get in early, we say, well, we can grow it to a bigger pie faster. We know that there's an exit, and we've joined you in a way where you're designing and developing it in a way that makes it more attractive for an acquisition. So our hope is a win-win, and you know, there may be signaling issues where, you know, one of our competitors says, oh, Estee Lauder's on, you know, the cap table, we don't want to purchase, but our hope is that that's not an impact in the long run, because we've been seen to play there, and if they want to go to an open market bidding process and an M&A in the future, you know, we completely understand.
Right. More trust built, right, if you come in at an early stage. So let's go to the dark side of CVC, which is for those of you who listen to Jason Kalinakis, who's an investor in the States, on his podcast, which is quite popular, he told a story of Whoop, the digital tracker. And they claim that the founder of Whoop went in because Amazon wanted to invest, and they got as much diligence as they could, and they tried to launch their own product without ever investing. That's a fear for a lot of young startups, right? You don't want to open the kimono too much and kind of really show your roadmap, your technology. How real is that threat? Is that just paranoia, or is it a real threat when it comes to IP?
I guess from my perspective, just having worked with CVCs in the past, you know, I think that there's always inherent risk in certain things, but at the end of the day, the majority of investors in the ecosystem are generally quite positive, and it's just a matter of having those conversations and getting a feel for who, you know, at the end of the day, who you're talking to and what that investment can look like. And the best corporations are going to be the best people to invest with, and it's going to show on their track record. So I think that if some of these CVCs maybe take advantage of certain situations, that'll show pretty quickly. And then from there, you know, reputation's key in a lot of things. So I think that some bad experiences may occur, but for the most part, you know, it's just a matter of getting to know the people that are going to be on your cap table and building those strong relationships.
I can't imagine what happened to Amazon's deal flow as soon as that info came out, right? Like, word does get around. And I think we work really hard to develop like quality relationships from the start. And we know, you know, we'll put the NDAs in place, but it comes up sometimes where, you know, especially at a lab or an R&D center, they'll be like, hey, we're doing research. And I go, oh, we have to stop having conversations. Our team's working on the exact same thing internally. Right, so we try to set that up, you know, in the right ways and put the right protections around and build just from a place of a partnership, knowing that, you know, if that deal is not right for some reason, it does get around in the industry, and you know, the founders are close, and beauty is small for us, and so we're always trying to approach it in I think the best founder-friendly way possible, and so hopefully that's reflected and founders get that.
So you can't have a conversation about venture and investing without talking about the tightening venture market. Many CVCs invest off their balance sheet, right? How are you seeing more deal flow? Are you seeing more opportunities? How has this contraction in the venture market, especially in Series A, B, C stages, How is it improving the way you invest, impacting the way you invest in any way? And I'll open up to anyone who wants to jump in.
It has been, I think, beneficial for us. You know, we, I'd say, are very methodical. We have never, as a CVC, been able to cut a check in a day or a week, or what we saw, you know, at the height of the market. We are, I think, do deeper due diligence, having seen issues with businesses in the past from the M&A. And so a bit of how it's changed and the market shifted is given kind of us the ability and the time to do what we've always done, right? Find those founders who want to spend time understanding how we work together, right? Understanding how the business relationship works, what they can tap, us understanding their business. So it's worked out, I'd say, in our favor. We're doing just, I would say, as many deals. You know, our strategy hasn't changed. Our deal flow, I'd say, if anything, is increasing as, you know, over the last couple of years, people have shifted to jobs that they want more, right? Founded more companies, started to do more interesting things that align with their passions. So we've seen a lot more, I think, say, beauty founders and continue to expand our network. I know you asked where we source. We have accelerators that we have partnerships with. We started an internal scout program to leverage our 60,000 Estee Lauder employees. We do on-the-ground in-market research. We're going to Saudi Arabia and China and, you know, all over the world, trying to see what's on the shelves and what consumers are using. So we work, you know, really hard to find, I'd say, the best of the best. And so it's nice to see, I'd say, more and more companies getting started by founders who can now follow their passions.
David, are you seeing that?
Yeah, boom or bust. There's never a shortage of really smart people that want to do something really big and great, and there's never a shortage of, there's never a slowdown in the rate of exponential technology, which self-defines itself. It's changing always at an exponential rate, no matter what technology sector. And so the talent is finding that 1% of all the entrepreneurs that are going to be responsible for creating 70% of the venture returns. And the way to do that is to match the perfect diligence of where are those best ideas and the best entrepreneurs with a quality investment syndicate that can identify who those people are. What we bring to that table is not that sourcing and selecting, but working with very high quality corporations that we can quantify and qualify their most strategic business outcomes and use those business outcomes to match a startup that can unleash valuation by engaging with them from early commercial deployments through a global scale.
So I'm not sure if we have more time, or I see 0 on the clock. So we're okay? Okay. So some predictions, because why not? What do you see happening? So two questions here. What do you see happening in the M&A market, and especially as it ties to CVC? And number 2, do you see CVC becoming more important in venture? Like in the reading that I was doing prior to the panel in the last few weeks, like there's a lot of debate on the value that CVC adds. And I'll speak for the North American market, right? I'm not going to speak for LATAM. But do you, there's an argument there's only like 5 good CVCs out there. Ryan, Estee Lauder is going to be the 6th. But the question is that, you know, do you see this improving? I mean, do you see this increasing as like there's a focus on innovation? Do you see it contracting? Do you see it staying the same? What do you see next, you know, in the next kind of 12 to 18 months as we move forward here?
Well, maybe I'll let the rest of the guys talk about the North America market and European markets, but in Latin America, I see, or what we've seen is really an increase in CVC activity. And I'd say, personally at least, I think CVCs have a fundamental role in all Latin America. You don't see the amount of capital that you see in other parts of the world. You don't see the size of the markets. Latin America as a whole is completely different than other parts of the world. So CVCs that have the local knowledge want to develop the startup ecosystem in each of the different countries play a fundamental role. And therefore, you do see a lot more activity in new CVCs being formed, new capital from CVCs, with the idea of developing the startup ecosystem firstly, but also I mean, there is talent in the entirety of Latin America, and that is not necessarily seen with the same interest from other parts of the world. And that's where CVCs play a fundamental role, and I think that's why it's been becoming much more important in our region.
We've talked to dozens of corporations, not only around Latin America, but also in the United States and Canada. And what I see as differentiation in them is that any corporation in any industry, in order to survive long term, must think of themselves as a technology company. It doesn't matter what industry they're in. They need to think about themselves as a technology company and embrace what's out there as a way to learn, as a way to get insight as to what might be coming in the future, and hopefully, whether they're investors or not, create a compelling value proposition for a startup to engage with them. I think because of how ubiquitous technology is, corporations are likely to create more CVCs over time, and how they distinguish themselves with their agility at engaging and being able to have honest conversations with a startup early on in their engagement to tell them, this is right, this is not, we're already doing this, we don't want to impinge on your success, and disengaging is really where the success lies.
Just to add on to that, something that's really interesting that I've seen in Canada is there's an organization called Pathways Alliance. It's 4 of the biggest energy companies in the world, and the way that they're thinking about the future in terms of developing technologies. So you have 4 of the biggest energy companies in Canada working together. They're looking at early stage companies that are developing technology that they know are going to be problems in the future. So carbon capture technology, renewable energy, and you have the collaborative approach that this is something we can solve together. So it's not about each person running their own venture capital arm. It's how do we work together to capitalize these companies to solve really big, challenging problems.
Anyone else? Ryan, did you go?
No, I mean, we've seen an increase in it, I think, especially within our space. Some fast followers from other competitors. I think, and I've done a lot of work in the past in consulting and in other venture groups that I've been a part of, helping coach corporates through this. And I'd seen over the last 7 to 10 years, just people getting smarter. It used to be let's dabble, and it may report up to the wrong person, and it takes a lot of. I think anybody here I've met who, as well as been creating a CVC, like it takes a year or 2 of groundwork up front to build it in the right way for success. And so I think as you see more examples of CVCs doing it and doing it well, and you have corporates that have gone through that process of figuring out the model that best works for them, you've just seen a rise in how it's done and some creativity and ways to do it differently. And I think that's just going to continue. And so the hopes is, that they see the success and can build on that. We'll see how the market cycles go, and if some of them shift the other way, that's a bit of the question mark, I think, what you were asking. But I think at least corporates are getting smarter.
Awesome. We can open it up for questions if anyone would like to ask the panel anything. We have a few minutes. No one? Should I call on someone? No questions? Okay then, well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciated the discussion. And thanks for Volcano for having us.